A little bit weird for me because this feels like home. I feel like this is so great that I'm among friends. On the way here in the cab, I was telling Jason, I said, I don't mean to be arrogant, but I am really loved. And and I feel that way about here, is that I feel very welcome to be among you. So thank you for allowing us to be here. I want to introduce a little bit about, well, actually, why don't we sit down?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I was born in Taiwan, raised in the U.S. I was a journalist for a while, and now I do my own. I started my own PR firm, but that has nothing to do with my relationship with Jason, actually. So the reason why I know Jason was because about 4 years ago, when I was living in China, I was going through a pretty dark period of my life. It was to the point that I was questioning, what's the point of me being in this world? I feel like a leftover. I feel like an extra. And I just didn't feel like I was needed at all. And that feeling could be quite detrimental. A very good friend of mine at that time said, Jenny, you need to go see someone. I'm like, no, I'm Jenny Sue. I could tough this out. Don't worry about it. I could do this. But that turned out to be not true. I was not in a good place. And the only way that she convinced me to see someone was to say, if something happened to you, who's gonna look after your cats? And then I thought, oh, right, Scoopsy, Daisy, and Hannah, someone needs to take care of them. And that's how I got to know a lady named Melissa. And Melissa is a life coach that both Jason and I share. About 2 years ago, during one of my conversations with Melissa, she said, I got permission from this client and I would like to tell you about him. I think that you guys could work really well together. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just feel like you two should be friends. And it turned out to be Jason. So she started telling me about Jason's story, this super successful guy from the US, was part of the PayPal mafia, worked closely with big names like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. And as he was ascending, he was a rising star in Silicon Valley. But beneath all that glitz and glam, I mean, Jason was struggling really hard with an addiction. And she said, and he was so brave and he wrote it all down. And I went, stop talking. All I need, I'm already fascinated. I'm already interested. Tell him, I don't know who he is, but tell him if he wants the book to be translated into Chinese, I'm the girl for him. And I think a few days later, we got a call together. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been talking to each other, at least on a weekly basis.
2 years.
2 years. Sorry. 2 years. 2 years. We've been talking on a weekly basis, not just about how to bring the book. Well, I'll say this very quickly. My relationship with Jason went from client to confidant. He is someone I lean on, someone I turn to when I have questions. I would say 80-90% of our call starts with Jason asking me, so Jenny, how are you doing? Tell me more about what's going on in your life. And yeah. And so, and this is why he's here today. The book has been translated. The English book is called Silicon Valley Porn Star, and we have copies for sale at the back. But tonight's not about me. Tonight is about Jason's story. So I also want to turn the time over to Jason to say a few words before I start interviewing him.
Oh. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you, Adam, and the team here for hosting this event. And Jenny, thanks for arranging this. And thanks for making this Chinese version of the book. You didn't hold it up, but I'm very proud of this. Thank you for making this happen. This is really your work. Jenny helped me find translators, cover designer, publisher, everything. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Do you want to go?
Oh, sure. Well, where should we start?
Well, I'll start. Okay, so Jason, your book is called Silicon Valley Porn Star.
It's still embarrassing every time. After I mean, it took me 3 years to write the book. It's been out for 2 years. It's still embarrassing every
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Well, tell me about the title because I feel there are two parts of this title. There's the Silicon Valley part, and there's the porn star part. So why don't we start with the Silicon Valley part? Why Silicon Valley? What were you doing there, or were you there?
Yeah, no, I grew up in New Jersey in the East Coast of the United States, and pretty normal life. Kid, played soccer, was a Boy Scout, had an older sister, grew up in the suburbs, and then went off to college in Colorado, went to the University of Colorado, studied chemical engineering, and then went off to California to go to graduate school. And that was in late 1999, and that was during the first dot-com boom. Late 99 was kind of the peak. Maybe early 2000 was really the peak, and then everything crashed in April-ish 2000. And so I got to Silicon Valley. I started my master's degree program, and all my classmates had work experience, and I felt like I should get some work experience. And so I went and I got a job at this company that turned into PayPal. And so I got a job. I think the day I started, we had 14,000 users, and within a month we had 100,000 users. And a month after that, we had 1 million users. And I was just looking around going, oh my gosh, I think if I drop out of school and work here, maybe I can make some money on my stock options or something. And I can always go back to school after if it doesn't work out. And my parents thought I was crazy, but I dropped out and it worked out. I eventually went back and finished my degree.
Right.
But yeah.
Tell us about what was it like working for PayPal at that time and the rocket ship progression that you guys experienced.
Yeah, well, within 3 years of me starting there, the company went public, had an IPO, and then got acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion, which back then was a huge number. It's still a big number.
Huge.
It is still a big number.
Yeah.
I feel like back then it was even bigger. And it was really intense. It was really great. Silicon Valley, the energy in Silicon Valley at the time was really frantic. So much was going on, and so many new companies were getting born. And then after the PayPal experience, all these people I worked with went and started new companies. And so I don't know how familiar this group is, but the people who worked at PayPal went on to start YouTube, Steve Chen from Taiwan, a company called Yelp, LinkedIn.
Sequoia.
Well, he didn't start Sequoia, but my boss, Roloff, went and became the head of Sequoia Capital, maybe the most important venture capital fund in the world. Elon went off and started Tesla, then he started SpaceX. I mean, and there's more. It's just pretty incredible what the group went off and did. And so I was very lucky to be in the middle of this group and had all of these amazing job opportunities after that. But we still haven't gotten to why there's the porn star.
Oh yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm getting there. So yeah, so
I did not have a career as a porn star. I just want to.
as far as I know, he doesn't. But
did not have a career. And there's nothing pornographic in the book. I want to make that clear too, because I feel like at times people have been scared. Yeah.
Actually, you give me a perfect segue for my next question. Is the first part of your book title is Silicon Valley, and you got to tell us a little bit about what was it like working in Silicon Valley or at that time at PayPal. And I imagine it was super high stress.
Yeah.
Super high stress. Just give us a quick glance at what's a typical day like that you had when you were working at PayPal.
Well, I was just working all the time. We were all working around the clock. My wife's recollection of those times was me sleeping under my desk or going home just long enough to shower and go back to the office. Of course, that didn't happen every single night, but we were just working hard. There's no way to create, to grow that fast and to do all of that in such a short period of time. But really, I feel like another thing that was happening in Silicon Valley, and certainly for me at the time, was that you had all of these young people with so much responsibility. I mean, I was just in my mid-20s. The CEO, Peter, at the time, I want to say he was 35 or something like that. I mean, he was a kid. It was like kids managing kids building multi-billion-dollar companies, and it wasn't just PayPal, it was happening all over the place. So and we were all just trying to figure things out as we went. And we didn't really have a lot of guidance because this was Internet 1.0. We didn't have all the veterans from 1.0 helping in version 2.0. It was just you're recruiting people who are coming out of kind of legacy companies and legacy industries who are really struggling in the culture because it was so different. A startup was just such a different thing. Now you have people studying how to be entrepreneurs and startups in college, right? It's like a career track. Back then, it wasn't like that. So we were really out on the front end, pioneering, lots of responsibility, lots of other people's money. And yeah, it was very stressful.
Some people, when they deal with stress, sometimes they turn into alcohol, or they golf a lot, or they watch TV. What was your way of relieving your stress at that time?
For me, it was porn. Yeah, which really kind of started a little bit when I was in college. But this was around the time that it started to go from maybe like a habit to like it wasn't maybe quite a drug at that point, but maybe it was becoming a drug. And it was during that time that, you know, when I first started looking at porn, it's always awkward to talk about. But it was just still images on a screen. But then internet bandwidth started to get bigger, and then you had videos, and then you had high resolution videos with sound, and it was just all available instantly with a click of a button. And so feeling stressed, feeling bored, feeling anything, it turns out, feeling anything, it was like I could open up my laptop or go on my computer and get lost in the screen and not have to feel anything.
It was a numbing agent.
It was a numbing agent. But then at some point it wasn't enough. And then it turned into hookups. And I had a girlfriend, and then hookups turned into affairs. And that girlfriend became my fiance and then my wife. And then before I knew it, I was leading kind of a double life.
Some would say our external chaos is a reflection of internal chaos, is something that we're trying to run away from, or something that's not haven't been properly addressed. If you were to think back, what was that one thing that probably wasn't properly addressed that drove you to develop that habit?
I think it was two things. I had some traumas in my childhood, which I talk about in the book. When I was very young, my parents got divorced and my father moved away. I think I was 6 or 7. And that was traumatic. And I didn't understand actually that traumatized me until I was in my 30s in therapy. And it came out one day and I was sobbing on a couch with this, like, that I missed my dad. And I didn't even know that it was in there. So that was really fascinating. When I got a little bit older, my mother, when I was in about 6th grade, she fell into a pretty deep depression. It probably started when I was like 4th, 5th grade, but I was less aware of it. But she kind of disappeared on me because she was either sleeping or heavily medicated. So even if she was awake and walking around the house, she was kind of like had a glazed look on her face and just like not really emotionally there. That's traumatic for a young child. And then to cap things off, she had remarried a man who had some issues with anger. And I was very afraid of him. And he occasionally hit me, certainly yelled at me a lot, yelled at my sister. He was angry and violent, and I was very afraid of him. And so, I mean, any kid
Yeah.
like developing in that kind of environment there's something missing there. Like healthy attachment, that love that I kind of needed at that
Yeah.
time in my life. And so you asked if was there anything that kind of drove me there. I feel like that was part of it. So I didn't really have a solid foundation. And then the flip side of that is I was by myself a lot, watching a lot of television, watching a lot of movies. And in the movies and TV, it's like, who's the successful man? It's the guy that has the money and the Ferrari and the, attractive women are want him, and he's got the big house and he's got all the success. And so the big title, whatever. And so that's what I need to do.
Right.
If I do those things, I'll be happy.
So tell us about that, Jason.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. So in my early 20s, I kind of fall into this PayPal thing. And by my mid 20s, I've now made more money than I ever imagined I would make, more money than my parents had made in their whole lives of working. So then I felt guilty about that too. But also I just didn't have a solid foundation, and my ego swelled. And I thought, oh, I'm now a successful man. I'm supposed to go buy fast cars and go get women. And that's what I did. And I thought those things would make me happy.
And not only I was supposed to get that, I think I'm entitled to those things.
I'm entitled
I deserve
to
those
I
things.
deserve those things. Yeah. There was a strong sense of entitlement.
Right.
Yeah.
And your double life continued for a couple of years, more than a couple of years.
Yeah, it continued for a while, and it was a secret from everyone. No one I worked with knew. I stopped talking to my friends about it. I had one friend who tried to tell me, hey man, maybe you should rethink what you're doing. And I was like, yeah, you're just jealous.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I was way off to the deep end. The second time he brought it up, I was like, I'm just not going to talk to him anymore.
I'm just going to defriend you. Unfriend.
Yeah, something like that.
Delete.
And, it's interesting because when I first wrote this book, I thought I was writing it as a cautionary tale for young men and women of like what not to do, to question those things that society is telling you are going to make you happy. I got those things. I still wasn't happy. Let me just demystify that for you. By the time I was done and reading the final drafts, I realized, and my daughter got older, I realized young people don't want to hear any advice from me or maybe anyone. But also that like going through those trials and difficult periods is part of life. And it certainly now has made me who I am today. And so my ability to take a young person by the shoulder and say, listen to me, I'm telling you, it's not all you think it's going to be. They're not going to hear me. Like I might as well be speaking Mandarin. Like my friend might as well have been speaking Mandarin to me. I just couldn't hear what he was saying.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So what happened? I mean, you were living this double life. You were you're working.
I got carried away with it. Sorry.
Working probably 18 hours a day at the office, if not more.
Well, I mean, I was working all the time.
You're working all the time.
But it wasn't all work, right? It was managing my double life too. It was creating opportunities to hide my time, creating opportunities to hide where I was spending my money, right? It was a mess. And so eventually, that's exhausting. Yeah. I mean, eventually I got caught.
Yeah. Tell us about that wake-up call. What happened? What was the turning point that made you say, oh, not only my friends was right, I need to change. This is not okay. What was that turning point?
Yeah, there were two. There was I feel like life gives us these wake-up calls in like doses, right? It's like you get a little one, and then if you don't wake up, you get a little stronger one.
Right. And then maybe a bitch slap on the face.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had that.
So the first one was I was a venture capitalist. I still am. And one of the employees from one of the portfolio companies that we had invested in invited me back to her apartment after a happy hour. And I went. And not much happened, but a few months later, she complained to the CEO that she felt very uncomfortable with what had happened. And that was the first time that I had kind of crossed that boundary. And the CEO was avoiding me for a while. I had no idea why, but I kind of had an idea why. We finally get on the phone and he says, "Hey, this isn't really a good situation. We don't know what's going to happen." And so I felt like I had to tell my wife. And I told her, and I told my life coach. And that was the first kind of hint that, like, hey, you're now taking more risk. And now you're jeopardizing your marriage, your career. Like, you need to stop. And then about a year later, and I was on good behavior for a while, maybe even more than a year. No, about a year. And then about a year later, I got caught again. And then I couldn't say, "Hey, this is the first time." And when I got caught that second time, the life coach was like, "This isn't the first time. This isn't the second time. You have to tell the truth. I know something's going on there." And I resisted it. And finally she said, "If you don't share your secrets, you'll never get well." And that was the moment that I just said, "Okay, this has been going on for a long time." And she said, "How long?" And I said, "I can't remember." And she said, how many times has this happened?" I said, "I can't remember." And her assignment to me was to start writing down everything I could remember. And I started journaling that night, and I stayed up for hours journaling. And I continued, and then this process continued for a couple days. And that was when I finally admitted that I had a serious problem and I couldn't stop.
And throughout that process, whether it's talking to Melissa or journaling or confessing your secret to your wife and Melissa, what did you discover about yourself that drove you to needing that kind of attention from the outside? What did you discover? What are some of the things that were going on inside you that needed that extra validation?
Well, I think so one of the first things that Melissa recommended after write it all down was maybe look for a 12-step program. And I didn't even know that such a thing existed for this issue. So I went online and looked, 12-step program for sex.
Yeah.
And I was shocked that there was such a thing, Sexaholics Anonymous. And I started reading the website, and it just described my life. And it was incredible. And so then I started going to meetings, and that really helped me. I'm kind of like trying to determine how much detail to go into, but in a dark, I was going to wind up getting divorced. My daughter was going to not be in my daughter's life. I thought property. It was embarrassing, and they were mad. So my low point, that was kind of my rock bottom. And the 12-step program put a floor under me, and it gave me something to stand on so that I could start putting one foot in front of the other. And probably the biggest things I took away from that program were I had to have more compassion for myself, and that I had completely neglected the spiritual side of my life. Up until that point, I was a mind and a body. I'd read something for my brain, exercise for my body. That was it. I had no spiritual connection to myself or my soul. And it was really when I started when I shared all of my secrets and let it all out, and then started to build that relationship with myself, that I was really able to start healing.
I want to go a little bit deeper on the self-compassion part. There's a part in the book that you had a session with Melissa, and she talks about the mistakes or the behavior that we all have doesn't define who you are as a whole. I want to go to that chapter really quick. It's in chapter 10. Sorry, I can't see without my glasses. This is what she said. She tells me that we all have an entire population of identity that reside inside us. We all have a hard worker identity, a partier identity, an honest guy girl identity, a liar, an identity that cares about other, one that's selfish, etc., etc. The list goes on. There are hundreds of them. All of us are all of these identities combined at the same time. Our personality that the world sees on the outside is the external expression of the identities inside of us that are most active and prominent. Can you elaborate on that part? What did she mean by the different identity within us? And what was that identity that drove you to be that Jason in the Silicon Valley Jason?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is where the name porn star comes from in the title. When I first had a little bit of a small wake-up call that I didn't really pay attention to, but I at least started saying, oh my gosh, I'm taking more risk. And I told my life coach, I said, I have to start fixing this. What can I tell her? I don't want to tell her the whole truth. Which, by the way, if anyone's talking to a coach or a therapist or a mentor trying to get help, I mean, one piece of advice is you have to tell them the truth. You have to tell them everything that's going on. It took me years before I did that. And finally, when I did, that's when I really started healing and changing. And so if that's one young man emailed me that was his main takeaway from the book, was that the next day at his therapy session, he finally told his therapist everything and was able to start his career.
I'll tell you about this later.
Okay.
It's quintessential Taiwan.
Okay. And so I told her, I said, I have to tell her something because I need to figure this out. Maybe if I just talk about the porn thing, then this philandering, cheating thing will go away. And so I said, I look at porn more than I would like. And I feel like it's not good for me. And she's like, okay. And actually, she kind of laughed. She was like, did you say porn? And she kind of made light of it. And I was so embarrassed to share it. And she made light of it. And then I was like, yeah, porn. And she's like, well, okay. And then it's like, well, what kind of porn? And I was like, I've never told anyone that. Like anyone. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that, you know? But she made light of it, and I gradually started sharing things with her that I couldn't believe the words were coming out of my mouth. But as I was sharing it, I felt so much better. And so then we'd get on the phone every week, and she started calling me porn star and say, so how's porn star this week? And again, just making light of the whole thing helped me share. And so we talked about it in terms of these identities inside of us. And it was like, you know, let's not talk about, it's not that Jason's looking at porn, it's porn stars looking at porn. And it's just like a subtle device, but it allowed me to feel less self-conscious about it and less ashamed about it and say, yeah, it's not me, I'm not a bad guy. I've got this guy over here on my left shoulder that's acting up and kind of ruining my life, or not ruining my life, but like really ruining the party maybe. And so that was the beginning of starting to recognize that I had this identity that was really running my life. And I had to learn about that. And go ahead, looks like.
No, I was agreeing with you. You mentioned in the book that, yes, you recognize that this identity was inside you and was very loud and boisterous and was trying to take charge. And then something happened with this porn star identity. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I was very mad at him. I hated this part of myself. And that's important because part of having integrity as a person is not just being honest and telling the truth. That's one definition of integrity, and that's the one we tend to focus on. But another definition of integrity is more like the structural integrity of something. And do I have a solid foundation? Is there structural integrity inside of me? And the truth is that no, I did not have a solid foundation. My foundation did not have integrity. And sorry, we're
Right.
about that.
With that realization of integrity, or the need to have that solid integrity, you've come to reconcile with this identity.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. So I was so mad at that part of myself, I was trying to dismiss it. Like, I don't want that to be part of myself anymore. And if you do that, you're taking a part of yourself and you're not integrating it into who you are. And then you can't have that integrity. So you can't just take parts of yourself that you don't like and dismiss them and sweep them under. That was the big takeaway, was I had to understand what was driving his behavior. Why did he need so much attention? And this is what started to lead into, there's part of me that really needs a lot of attention. There's part of me that didn't get attention in parts of times in my life and development when I really needed it. And then we started to go back to those times and feel what it was like to be that young boy, and go visit him and spend time with him and give him a hug and help him start to heal and start to grow. And, I talk about this a lot in the book, but going back and spending time with my inner child was a really important part of that journey, because on the outside, I looked like a man, but on the inside, I was still a boy. Parts of me were still very much a boy because his emotional development had been stopped at various stages. And I talk about it now, but it took me months and months and years of working, excavating that broken foundation, taking it all out, and then rebuilding it in a more solid way. It was a long process.
In the book, there are 3 different stages to Jason. So we see the young boy Jason, you talk about that. And then you talk, that's Jason 1.0. Then Jason 2.0 is the Silicon Valley Jason, working at this hypergrowth startup. And then Jason 3.0 is when you realize that your lifestyle is no longer okay and that you needed to change. I feel like right now we're now at the Jason 4.0. And as Jason 4.0, what are some of the things that you learned in the last 3 iterations that's helping you now as a father, as a venture capitalist, as a friend, and as a human being?
Yeah. Well, this process of integration, I feel that was the driving force behind my work with this life coach for so long. And it wasn't just her, it was also books that I was reading and videos I might watch from other spiritual leaders. And the more I came to know myself and integrate all of those parts of myself and hold up that mirror to myself and say, oh, I don't like what I see here, but I'm going to look at it anyway. And I'm going to love him and have compassion. And we're going to integrate all of that. I got to a place where I was a lot more content, and I didn't need as much. I felt like I didn't need as much validation or attention. And that allowed me to go out in the world and start interacting with people in a different way. So when I met someone, I wasn't thinking about, what am I getting out of this? Or if I invested in a company, I wasn't just focused on, what am I going to get out of this? I was really interested in the other person and what's going on with them and how can I be in service to them, because I felt pretty full. I had recharged my own battery to the point where I could be a source. Right. I had also kind of reconnected with source.
Right. Yeah. So it's sort of like your cup runneth over to the point that you could share that.
I should not overstate that. My cup. I mean, I won't say that I've arrived or anything like that, but yes, I got to a place where I was able to remove a lot of layers, heal my foundation to a point where I wasn't as needy. And because I didn't need things, I was in a better position to give.
I want you to go a little deeper on the giving part, on the being in service of other part. You talk to a lot of founders and startup people. You probably also mentor a few CEOs here and there. How does that mentality of being service other affect the way you mentor CEOs now, or the way you invest, or the way you think about founders?
Well, I feel like I encourage them to lead from that place of integrity, not just being honest, but having a lot of integrity and building that integrity inside of themselves so that they can be in service. And I really just feel like at this point, as an adult in society, my responsibility is to be in service. I feel like that's all of our responsibility. Um, but I take it really seriously. And when I work with leaders, I try to help them see that as well, because I believe when you create a culture like that, where all of the leaders believe that they're there to be in service to the people who are working for them, creates a really magical culture.
If I needed to say there was a victim of this, it would be your wife. She was very much part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you guys are still together, and as the Jason 4.0, what does that mean to be in service of as a husband?
Mm. Well, I think I think a lot of it comes down to holding space for each other and recognizing that we are two souls moving through this lifetime together, and that we are there to teach each other things and to learn from each other and to support each other in each other's growth. And so if something happens, maybe not to necessarily take it personally, but say, this is her and her journey, and there's something I can learn here as well. And just supporting each other that way, instead of, you did this thing, I don't like it, and we're getting divorced or something like that. It's much more like, why is this happening? How have I contributed to this? Working together to grow together.
Mm-hmm. There's a part in the book.
I think we may be one more time, maybe the last one.
Yeah, this is the last one. There's a part in the book that I really love. Hold on. It is this actually happened on your wedding. Somebody read a poem.
Uh-huh.
This is a poem by a Lebanese American poet named Khalil Gibran. And I'm just going to read a few sentences from it.
Sure.
It says, "But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but not drink from the one cup. Give one another your bread, but not eat from the same loaf. Sing and dance together, be joyous, but let each other of you be alone." What now, you were married 18 years ago, and now looking back, what does that mean that in a marriage that you give each other space and be joyous together, but give each other some space and not always have to be together?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just that. It's giving each other that space to boy, it's hard to summarize this. How do we do this? It's that's a tough question. We, it's a lot of it comes back to holding that space for the other person. And if they're going through something, not being worried about what does this mean for me?
Not take things personally.
It's not just taking it personally, but it's like, if she has something that's going on in her life, it's just being there for her. It's, I mean, in a weird way, it's like in that moment, I need to be her roommate, not her husband. I need to just hold space for her to vent or to share or to process or to work through something and not be afraid of how is this going to affect me. And similarly for me, if I'm going through something, she needs to be able to hold that space for me. And that's hard sometimes to do, because we all tend to get so close. And so it takes a little bit of space to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
I've seen Adam giving me the 1 minute sign. Now we have 0 minute left.
Yeah.
But now I want to open the floor to all of you to ask any questions that you have for Jason.
We might need to pass the mic around.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, Jason. Hello, everyone. My name is Diana. I'm Taiwanese from Taipei. I come from the startup companies, cybersecurity industries. And I really appreciate you're so honest tonight to share your stories. I have a couple of questions. One question is I personally also have, I'm younger, much younger than you. Sorry. But yeah,
Don't be sorry.
Yeah.
if I didn't go through some pain in the past years, some downfallness, I wouldn't accept your speech tonight. And I realized that only young people, they have to go through the painfulness. They could listen to you or listen to similar people's speech. And when I just finished a book by Matthew Perry, Chandler's.
Yeah.
And his story is also very similar to the story. Of course, different people, different lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar is people really have to go through things.
I agree 100%. We were just talking about this before this talk tonight.
But for young generation like me, I was born in 1988. I live in Taiwan. This is a very prosperous, rich country. We have TSMC. I have very rich family and good salary, star, knowledge. So that's why we have so rich raw materials. I feel work, mind, and spiritual age is so fragile. And so we are suffering some psychological problems. For me personally, I'm not from the porn or drug. Oh, drug is not possible like in US. This is Taiwan. It's illegal to get access to the drugs. Or I'm suffering from a personal or romantic relationship.
Oh, you and I should talk.
Yes. Yes. So my question to you is, how do you get away from the fear in past? Do your past blame you of what you have done in the past? How do you talk to your past that I take care of that? That was me. How do you get reach harmony with your past? Because people talk about move on, Diane, move on, but
Yes, well, if it was that easy, it's just not that easy, right? If someone says move on, you can hear those words, you can think those words in your head, but the things that are operating are much deeper below the surface. It's your subconscious, it's your soul, it's all of these things are much, much deeper. And so the answer that I always come back to is just to continue your personal growth and development work. If you have a coach or a therapist or a mentor that you work with, continue doing that, but just keep going deeper and finding those fragmented parts of yourself and integrating them and loving them and accepting them and saying that was part of my journey. I mean, I write about so many things that I did that I was so ashamed of and embarrassed by and felt guilty about. And I had to get to a point where I realized I'm not a bad person. I did these things, but I'm not a bad person. And all of these things and all of the things I've learned have made me who I am today. And I'm proud of who I am today. And so I think that I don't think there's an easy answer. I think it's just, you just have to keep growing.
Yeah.
And growing and growing and growing, and gradually you move through it. And if you keep growing and building that integrity and letting go of your secrets, I think that's another big one. Finding a safe place to let go of your secrets, then you can experience some lightness and start to experience some freedom. And that's, at least that's been the recipe for me.
Thank you. So one more question is, is it okay that you and your wife ever have couple conflicts in the past?
Yeah, we did. So when things first started going wrong, I had a therapist. She tried talking to a therapist, and then we had a counselor that we saw together. But then that only went on for a few months. Then I met this life coach, and I got more out of that one session with this particular life coach than I did from all of my therapy sessions. So I told my wife about her, and then we both started talking to the same person, sometimes together, most of the time separately. But yeah, sometimes those sessions that we had together were very, very powerful. And the life coach's message to us was, I don't care if you guys get divorced or stay together. I just want you to be whole individuals. She just wanted both of us, because her attitude was, if you get to become a whole individual, it won't matter if you stay together or get divorced, because you'll be happy. It will be beautiful either way, was her kind of attitude. And I think she was right.
Yep. Okay, we have a question from the audience. Jason, why did you write the book? You didn't have to. Why did you write the book?
So I could come here and talk to you guys.
That's right.
I wrote the book. I started to say this earlier. When I first started writing the book, I thought it was to be a warning for young men of what not to do. By the time I was finished, I realized young people don't want to hear that, but hopefully it can still be a warning. But the people who were really resonating with the book were men closer to my age, middle-aged men, who had gone through some really difficult thing, and women, by the way. A lot of women, in fact, most of the Amazon reviews, I think, are from women.
That's right.
And a lot of them start with this, I'm not the target audience, but I got so much out of this book.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting, that it turned out that middle-aged folks, men and women, who had gone through some kind of difficult and traumatic experience and found themselves in a really dark place. You know, one of the worst parts about being in that dark place is that feeling that you're alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm not alone. Other people are here too, or have been here. And maybe this is a way that I can get out.
Yeah.
Even if the way you got into the dark was different, it doesn't have to be a porn addiction. A setback that you don't expect. It could be a dissolving marriage that's really traumatic. There's lots of ways that people find themselves. And so I wanted to write this, I wanted to share this so that people could learn, and I wanted to be in service. Those were really the primary reasons. I also got a lot out of it. That's not why I did it, but once it was all done, I got so much out of sharing all this.
Anne-Marie, I mean, your wife knows about this book.
Oh, yeah.
What's her reaction when you said, I'm going to write this book? And second part of that question is, you know, she had to deal with a partner who was dealing with infidelity. And what would you say to be the advice to those who are dealing with a partner who is struggling with, you know, this type of issue?
Yeah. Yes, Anne-Marie knows, and was very supportive from the beginning. When it kind of evolved a little bit, because this life coach first started asking me to talk with other couples that were going through marriage problems, largely tied to infidelities. And as I was sharing this with men and women, they were crying, I was crying. People were like, you need to write this down. And so then I said, Anne-Marie, would you be okay if I wrote all this down? And she was like, yeah. Because I think we both felt a strong sense that if anyone can learn from what we went through, then we want to share it. That was the big thing.
This is a question about you as a father. What would be that one thing you want to give to your son? And what if he said, let me go through this journey myself?
I'll answer the second one first. If he said that did you read my book? Because
Milo is only 7 now, right?
he's only 8.
8.
So, hopefully he wouldn't feel like he needs to do it, but I kind of agree with what you said, that in some ways it is these journeys that define us and help us grow. And so I think the thing I am trying to give him the most is, while he's a child, protecting his innocence as long as possible, being that secure anchor attachment point that he needs with primary caregivers, and just being there for him so he knows that we're there. The love is unconditional. I think at this age, that's kind of all they need. As he gets older, my daughter's 14 now, and so now we're starting to think about like rites of passage. How do you help an adolescent transition into adulthood? Because that's another place where I got lost. I was running around. I looked like an adult on the outside, but inside, emotionally, I was partly a child, partly an adolescent, and very little of me, I think, had made it to adulthood at that point. And so really, I hope that what I can give him is guidance on how to mature into or grow into a mature, responsible, in-service participant in society as an adolescent and as an adult. That's what I want to give him.
We have another question about how do you deal with people who knew about your past and probably not so pleased with what you did? Do you feel, are you embarrassed when you're around them now? What's their reaction when they heard about all that bad behavior that you were going through?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because nobody said anything negative to my face. So all I got was positive feedback. So it's possible that there's a lot of negative feedback out there and they're just not saying anything. But really all the feedback, and I was very scared about this. Right before my book came out, I went online and tried to erase myself, basically. I had written lots of things for venture capital. I had YouTube videos. I had blogs and articles, and I erased all of that stuff. I unfriended from everyone on Facebook. I disconnected from everyone on LinkedIn, Twitter, X, whatever. I did all of that because I was terrified that people were going to disown me and say, I don't want to be associated with this person. And it turned out to actually be the opposite, that everyone who found out about it and read the story, even the people that didn't read the story, kind of congratulated me and said, that was a really brave thing to do. Congratulations and thank you. Yeah. And so, yeah, I got a lot of support. Yeah.
We have one more question about stress. You talked about that it was, at work during the heyday of PayPal. Work was really, really stressful. Well, this question is, if it was just stress, why couldn't you just leave Silicon Valley and resign from your job?
It's a good question. I mean, interestingly enough, that's what wound up happening. So our marriage is not doing well at some point, and I quit my job and we try to repair our marriage. It's not working. A bunch of stuff happens. And then we wind up moving to Utah temporarily. It's supposed to be for 3 months. And then we wind up staying in Utah. And then in Utah is where all of the stuff finally really comes to the surface and the healing really starts. And so in an interesting way, we didn't know that that's why we were moving, but I think it did help with that. And so, I mean, when I was in the middle of it earlier on and I was younger and it was stressful, I was making money. It was exciting. I had titles at important companies and all of these things that at that time in my life were the definitions of success. I never had a thought like, oh, this is really stressful, I'm gonna leave. It was more like, well, how can I make even more money? You know, like, yeah, I was not in a place where I was thinking that. I didn't have that perspective. I was just so narrowly focused on this very small idea of what success would be.
But would you say that your addiction at that time, not just to porn and sex, but also to this fame and money and big title, just that feeling of I'm somebody, that's a really addictive feeling.
It is, especially if as a boy, you didn't get the love that maybe you needed. And, you know, I know that this happened. I'm not the only person this has ever happened to. Unfortunately, it's more common than we would like. But the result is that we have a lot of people walking around who are trying to fill some hole in their foundation, and they don't know it. They might not, I didn't even know it was there. Because the other weird thing is that I was getting praised by everyone, right? I'm making money, I'm getting promoted, my parents are proud of me and bragging to their friends.
You had your Ferrari.
Yeah, like, this is great, right? And so there's this weird way in which there are times where the ambition to succeed and this idea that like nothing's ever good enough and it needs to be more and more and more, that could come from an okay place, but I feel like most of the time it comes from a place, of lack. And it comes from a place of not feeling complete and maybe not having a solid foundation and trying to fill that with things from the outside world instead of filling it with, you know, things from with inside of you. That was, you know, one of the big takeaways.
Now you talked about that.
Do you have a question?
Sorry.
Oh yeah.
First, thanks for doing this. Yes. In the book, you talk about the notion of masculinity that you grew up with, which was success will be defined as making money and getting the girl and having the car. Now I've gone through this, gone through the process of writing the book, which I'm sure was cathartic. How do you view masculinity now? What is masculinity?
God, I'm so glad you asked this because, yeah, on the surface, it's this story of like the Silicon Valley thing and the porn and sex thing and the marriage thing, and there's like all this surface story. But really, right below that is this very fundamental story of a boy whose development is stunted, and he's walking around. He looks like a man on the outside, but he's really still a boy, and he realizes he has to grow up. That's one of the things that happens in one of my sessions with my life coach is I have this realization like, oh my gosh, I need to grow up. And then it's like, but how? Who are my role models? Who am I? I'm looking at like corporate leaders, political leaders. This was during like, so shortly after all this, I'm still asking myself these questions. Like, I know I need to grow up. I'm trying to grow up, but where am I looking for role models? And then you have the Me Too movement. And I'm like embarrassed to be a man. I'm like, what are these guys doing? And then I have a son. And then I really start feeling the pressure, like I need to figure this out. He gets to be 2-3 years old and I'm parenting him the way my stepfather parented me, with fear and anger, and it's not good. And I start going on this journey. The first thing I did, I read a book called How to Raise a Boy, really changed my life. I go on this journey of starting to read more books about how to answer this question, how to be a mature man in modern society. And that's really one of the things I've been focused on for the last several years is trying to answer that question. And I feel like this definition of masculinity that's defined by this kind of machismo power, money, or whatever. It's like, it's not right. I don't think it's right. And I feel like, for me, what does it mean to be a mature man? Take a lot of responsibility, be in service to my community, bring whatever gifts I have, knowledge I've accumulated, wealth I've accumulated, to bring it to the community for good, and to be in service. And those are some of the fundamental things. It's something I spent a lot of time thinking about. Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, sorry. On my.
Can you talk a little bit about principles, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. And actually, let me just say one other thing about the masculinity question. There's this idea that like sensitivity is not masculine or something like that, but it's so masculine. Men are very sensitive. In fact, sometimes it's that, I don't want to say oversensitivity, but it's that sensitivity that causes men to create that shell around them where they have difficulty connecting. It's because the core is so soft and tender that you can't let anything touch the core. So this idea that like it's not masculine to be sensitive is totally false. And afterwards we could talk about, I have some ideas about how that served us hundreds of thousands of years, 100,000 years ago, as part of our evolutionary development for men and women. We'll talk about that offline. But the other question of subtraction. So so I meet this life coach. My life is kind of not in a good place. And she's telling me, you're efforting your way through life. I'm going to teach you how to create more abundance in your life with less effort. And I'm like, I don't believe you. And my slogan was, monks don't have mortgages. It's like, I don't have time to sit and meditate on the couch. I have work to do. I have bills to pay, And I was really resistant at the beginning. And so we went on this journey and we started to subtract layers, simplify my life, started to say no to things, because it turned out that I was going to lunches and dinners and coffees and having meetings. A lot of that was to get attention, and because being busy was a badge of honor, and it made me feel important and it made me feel successful. And so once I started to realize those things and started saying no and doing less, I had a lot more stillness in my life, and I could be more present and I could feel more. And so anyway, that I carried into my professional work, and it made me a much more successful executive because I was just way more focused, and I could go into a situation and I could kind of see the problem that other people couldn't see because they were so distracted because they were doing so much stuff. And so when I started my venture capital firm, I called it Subtraction Capital. I got made fun of a lot. And so years in, I finally decided to change the name because ironically, the name itself was a distraction, which was when I had that realization, which took a couple of years, I finally changed the name. But yeah, that was the history of that.
We have a question from the audience about, now we're in Jason 4.0. If we're to look back, what would be the advice you would give to the Jason 2.0, who was rising high in Silicon Valley? Would you do anything different?
I don't know. I get this question a lot, and I always want to say I would do nothing different because everything I went through has made me who I am today. And I love who I am today. Like, I feel really good about where I am and the relationships I have with my wife and my kids and my family and my friends. I feel fulfilled in my work. I feel very proud of the book. I feel so proud that it's touching people and helping others, and I'm in service in that way. And so the temptation is to say, I wouldn't do anything different. And I think I would just I don't know. Maybe I just like walk alongside of him or something. I don't know. It's a tough question.
And I have another question for you is how would you advise young entrepreneurs at the beginning of their journey? How could they achieve more fulfilling, more rounded success, not only in business, but also personal in life?
Ooh, I like this one. One of the main things I like to talk about with entrepreneurs and co-founder CEOs, because that's who I usually work with if I'm invested in something, is this idea that the company is not them. And that I feel this is like quite philosophical, but we'll go here for a second, that in a way, I believe that whatever is happening in our life in the outside universe is just a reflection of what's happening inside of ourselves. It's a reflection of our state of consciousness on the inside. And so if you are birthing a creation into the world, this company, it's just a manifestation of what's inside of you. It's a reflection of what's inside of you. And so if that company starts to bump up against limitations in the world, probably those are a reflection of some kind of limitation inside of yourself that you need to resolve. And if you resolve it, it will resolve itself in the outside, in your outside universe. So the primary, Eckhart Tolle says this, the primary reality is within. The secondary reality is without. And so I try to talk to them about this and also make the point that the company is not them. And they have birthed this creation into the world. And their responsibility is to give the creation what it needs to succeed and then get out of the way.
Yeah.
And that sometimes hard for them because they want to control it. But I tell them, if you control it, it can't grow faster than you. And it can't grow bigger than you. And so you can do that for a while. If it was a startup company, maybe you can control it because it's a small thing. But at some point, it's going to get bigger than you. And you have to let it. And by the way, I find that when they internalize that and they really start thinking that way and treating their company that way, it reduces a lot of stress for them. Because part of what stresses them so much is when their identity is totally wrapped up in the success or failure of this company. Because that means if the company fails, they're a failure. But they're not. They're bigger than the company.
Right.
Yeah. And so that idea starts to cut through some.
Right. I really, really like that idea that you are not your company, your company isn't you. At the same token, you're not your mistakes. You're not your bad behavior. You're not your ugly habits. They don't define who you are. But that is just one part of you and that deserves attention and love from you. I think that is a huge part of your book is that you had that porn star identity and you actually come to love him. Can you tell us a little about that? As a way to wrap up the
Yeah, sure. I mean, I hated him. I really didn't like him. He was really creating a lot of hardship in my life and hurting the people, the loved ones in my life, and risking my career, risking my marriage, and all of these things. And I really disliked him, and I just wanted to go away. And I did that for a long time. Like, he's over there, and you need to sit down and behave. Or something like that. And I remember this one session I had with the life coach, and I was walking, and it was me and my identities, and he had like fallen behind, and he was like on the ground, and he couldn't walk, and I just wanted to leave him there. And we kept walking and walking, and I realized I can't leave him. I have to go back. And so we went back and we picked him up and we put his arm across my shoulder and someone else's shoulder and we carried him and we loved him. And that was probably the moment where I really started to integrate him into myself, where I finally started to accept him. And that was a really powerful moment.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. So that wraps up the interview part. And I want to thank Adam and the center, and Zoe for helping me to coordinate this event, and Helen for being the matchmaker for this event. Thank you so much. Thank you.